Open a bottle of bubbly. Yeah. Here's to another goddamn new year. And outside, 2 million drunk Bostonians are getting ready to sing Auld Lang Syne out of tune. I sit there in my easy chair, looking at the clouds, orange with celebration. I wonder if you're out there. Hey! The ice of Boston is muddy and reflects no light, day or night. And I slip on it every time. Open the third bottle of bubbly. Yeah, and I take that bottle of champagne, go into the kitchen, stand in front of the kitchen window, and I take all my clothes off, take that bottle of champagne, and I pour it on my head, feel a cascade through my hair and across my chest, and the phone rings. And it's my mother. And she says, "Hi, honey, how's Boston?" And I stand there all alone on New Year's Eve, buck naked, drenched in champagne, looking at a bunch of strangers, looking at them, looking at me, looking at them, and I say, "Oh, fine, Mom. How's Washington? Hey, the ice of Boston is muddy and reflects no light, day or night, and I slip on it every time." Hey, the ice of Boston is muddy and reflects no light, day or night, and I slip on it every time, yeah. So I guess the party line is I followed you up here. Well, I don't know about that. Mainly because knowing about that would involve knowing about some pathetic, ridiculous, and absolutely true things about myself that I'd rather not admit to right now. I woke up at 3 a.m. with the radio on, that Gladys Knight and the Pip song on, about how she'd rather live in his world with him than live in her own world alone. And I laid there, head spinning, trying to fall asleep, and I thought to myself, "Oh, Gladys, girl, I love you, but oh, get out of life! Hey, the ice of Boston is muddy and reflects no light, day or night, and I slip on it every time." Hey, the ice of Boston is muddy and reflects no light, day or night, and I slip on it every
3 November YDAU. Hal could hear the phone console ringing as he dropped his gear bag and took the room key from around his neck. The phone itself had been orange, and its plastic case was transparent, and you could see the phone's guts. Hello? Why do I always get the feeling I'm interrupting you in the middle of some, vigorous self-abuse session? It was Oren's voice. It's always multiple rings, and then you're always a little breathless when you do. Do what? A certain sweaty urgency to your voice. Are you one of the 99% of adolescent males, Hallie? Hal never liked talking on the phone after he'd gotten high in secret down in the pump room. Even if there was water or liquid handy to keep the cotton at bay, he didn't know why this was so. It just made him uneasy. You're sounding hale and fit, oh. You can tell me, no shame in it. Let me tell you, boy, I did myself raw for years on end on that hill. Hal estimated over 60% of what he told Oren on the phone, since Oren had abruptly started calling again this spring, was a lie. He had no idea why he liked lying to Oren on the phone so much. He looked at the clock. Where are you? Home. Snug and toasty. It's 90 plus out. That will be Fahrenheit, I'm assuming? This city is made of all glass and light. The windows are like high beams coming at you. The air has the spilled fuel shimmer to it. So to what do we owe? Sometimes I wear sunglasses, even in the house. Sometimes at the stadium, I hold my hand up and look at it, and I swear I can see right through it, like that thing with the flashlight and your hand. Hands seem to be sort of a theme to this call thus far. On the way in from a lot of the street here, I saw a pedestrian in a pith helmet stagger and claw at the air and pitch forward onto his face. Another Phoenician felled by the heat, I think to myself. It occurred to Hal that although he lied about meaningless details to Oren on the phone, it had never occurred to him to consider whether Oren was ever doing the same thing. This induced a spell of involuted marijuana-type thinking that led quickly again to Hal's questioning whether or not he was really all that intelligent. SATs are 6 weeks away, and Pemulus is less and less helpful on the math if you want to know what I'm doing all day. The man's face made a sizzling noise when it hit the pavement, like bacon caliber sizzling. He's still lying there. I see out the window. He's not moving anymore. Everyone's avoiding him, going around him. He looks too hot to touch. A little Hispanic kid made off with his hat. Have you all had snow yet? Describe snow for me again, Hallie. I'm begging you. So you go around with this image of me sitting around during the day masturbating? Is that what you're saying? Well, I've actually been thinking of maneuvering for the whole Kleenex concession at ETA as a venture. That, of course, would mean actually contacting CT and the moms. Me and this forward-looking reserve QB have been making inquiries, putting out feelers, volume discounts, preferred vendor status, maybe a sideline in unscented lubricants. Any thoughts? Oren? I'm sitting here actually missing New Orleans, kid. It'd be just coming up on Advent, I think. The quarter always gets really quaint and demure during Advent. It almost never rains down there during Advent for some reason. People remark on it, the phenomena. You sound somehow a little off to me, oh. I'm heat-crazed. I might be dehydrated. What's that word? Everything's looked all beige and powdery all day. Trash bags have been swelling up and spontaneously combusting out in the dumpsters. These sudden rains of coffee grounds and orange peels. The displacement guys in the barges have to wear asbestos gloves. Also, I met somebody. Hallie, a possibly very special somebody. Uh-oh, dinner time. Triangles are clanging over in the west. Hey, Hallie, though, hang on. Kidding aside for a second. What all do you know about separatism? Hal stopped for a moment. You mean in Canada? Is there any other kind? Enid House Drug and Alcohol Recovery House was founded in the year of the Whopper by a nail-tough old chronic drug addict and alcoholic who had spent the bulk of his adult life under the supervision of the Massachusetts Department of Corrections before discovering the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at MDC Walpole and undergoing a sudden experience of total self-surrender and spiritual awakening in the shower during his 4th month of continuous AA sobriety. This recovered alcoholic, who in his new humility so valued AA's tradition of anonymity that he refused even to use his first name, and was known in Boston AA simply as the guy who didn't even use his first name, opened Enid House within a year of his parole, determined to pass on to other chronic drug addicts and alcoholics what had been so freely given to him in the E-tier shower. Enid House leases a former physician's dormitory in the Enfield Marine Public Health Hospital complex managed by the United States Veterans Administration. Enid House is equipped to provide 22 male and female clients a 9-month period of closely supervised residency and treatment. Enid House was not only founded but originally renovated, furnished, and decorated by the nameless local AA ex-con who, since sobriety doesn't exactly mean instant sainthood, used to lead select teams of early recovery dope fiends on after-hours boosting expeditions at area furniture and houseware establishments. This legendary anonymous founder was an extremely tough old Boston AA galoot who believed passionately that everyone, no matter how broad the trail of slime they dragged in behind them, deserved the same chance at sobriety through utterly total surrender he'd been granted. It's a kind of extremely tough love found almost exclusively in tough old Boston galoots. He's sometimes the founder. In the house's early days, required incoming residents to attempt to eat rocks, as in like rocks from the ground, to demonstrate their willingness to go to any lengths for the gift of sobriety. The Massachusetts Department of Public Health's Division of Substance Abuse Services eventually requested that this practice be discontinued. Enid was not any part of the nameless Enid House founder's name, by the way. The rock thing, which has become a grim bit of mythopoeia now trotted out to illustrate how cushy the present Enid residents have it, was probably not as wacko as it seemed to a division of SAS, since many of the things veteran AAs ask newcomers to do and believe seem not much less wacko than trying to chew feldspar. E.g., be so strung out you can feel your pulse and your eyeballs, have the shake so badly you make a spatter painting on the wall every time somebody hands you a cup of coffee, have the life forms out of the corner of your eye be your only distraction from the chainsaw racing chatter in your head, sitting there, and have some old lady with cat hair on her nylons come at you to hug you and tell you to make a list of all the things you're grateful for today. You'll wish you had some feldspar handy too. In the year of the Jiu-Jitsu 2007 mimetic resolution cartridge view motherboard easy to install upgrade for Infernatron interlaced TP systems for home, office, or mobile, the nameless founder's death of a cerebral hemorrhage at age 68 went unremarked outside the Boston AA community. From Internal Interlaced System email memo CAHNNE 22 3575 634-22. Claims Adjustment Headquarters, State Farm Insurance Companies, Bloomington, Illinois, 26 June, year of dairy products from the American heartland. From Murray F.K. Klumskne 22.626 income to Powell G/Sanchez M/Perry K CLM HQNNE.626 income. Message. Guys, get a load. My death of a bad day. Metro Boston Region 22 this spring comp claim. Witnesses deposed by Boston Workmen's Comp. Established, claimant, impaired, and the emergency room ripped lists of blood alcohol of 3+, so be pleased to know we're clear of the 357-5 liability end. But basic facts below confirmed. Witnesses and CYD accident report. Here's just the first page. Get a load. Dwayne R. Glynn, 176 North Faneuil Boulevard, Stoneham, Massachusetts, 021808754-4, June 21st, YOD PFTAH. Workmen's Accident Claims Office, State Farm Insurance, 1 State Farm Plaza, Normal, Illinois, 61706-2262-6. Dear Sir, I'm writing in response to your request for additional information. In block number 3 of the accident reporting form, I put trying to do the job alone as the cause of my accident. You said in your letter that I should explain more fully, and I trust that the following details will be sufficient. I am a bricklayer by trade. On the day of the accident, March 27th, I was working alone on the roof of a new 6-story building. When I completed my work, I discovered that I had about 900 kilos of brick left over. Rather than laboriously carry the brick down by hand, I decided to lower them in a barrel by using a pulley, which fortunately was attached to the side of the building at the 6th floor. Securing the rope at ground level, I went up to the roof, swung the barrel out, and loaded the brick into it. Then I went back to the ground and untied the rope, holding it tightly to ensure a slow descent of the 900 kilos of bricks. You will note in block number 11 of the accident reporting form that I weigh 75 kilos. Due to my surprise at being jerked off the ground so suddenly, I lost my presence of mind and forgot to let go of the rope. Needless to say, I proceeded at a rapid rate up the side of the building. In the vicinity of the 3rd floor, I met the barrel coming down. This explains the fractured skull and the broken collarbone. Slowed only slightly, I continued my rapid ascent, not stopping until the fingers of my right hand were 2 knuckles deep into the pulleys. Fortunately, by this time, I had regained my presence of mind and was able to hold tightly to the rope in spite of considerable pain. At approximately the same time, however, the barrel of bricks hit the ground, and the bottom fell out of the barrel from the force of hitting the ground. Devoid of the weight of the bricks, the barrel now weighed approximately 30 kilos. I refer you again to my weight of 75 kilos in block number 11. As you could imagine, still holding the rope, I began a rather rapid descent from the pulley down the side of the building. In the vicinity of the 3rd floor, I met the barrel coming up. This accounts for the 2 fractured ankles and the laceration of my legs and lower body. The encounter with the barrel slowed me enough to lessen my impact with the brick-strewn ground below. I'm sorry to report, however, that as I lay there on the bricks in considerable pain, unable to stand or move, and watching the empty barrel 6 stories above me, I again lost my presence of mind and, unfortunately, let go of the rope, causing the barrel to begin a end transmission. Intcom 626. Hal M. Condensa's first extant written comment on anything even remotely filmic, submitted in Mr. Ogilvie's 7th grade Introduction to Entertainment Studies, 2 terms required, Enfield Tennis Academy, 21 February in the year of the Purdue Wonder Chicken. At 4 years after the demise of broadcast television, 1 year after Dr. James O. Incandenza passed from this life, a submission receiving just a B+, despite overall positive feedback, mostly because its concluding was neither set up by the essay's body nor supported, Ogilvie pointed out, by anything more than subjective intuition and rhetorical flourish. Chief Steve McGarrett of Hawaii 5-0 and Captain Frank Furillo of Hill Street Blues are useful for seeing how our North American idea of the hero changed from the BS 1970s era of Hawaii 5-0 to the BS 1980s era of Hill Street Blues. Chief Steve McGarrett is a classically modern hero of action. He acts out. It is what he does. The camera is always on him. He's hardly ever off-screen. He has just 1 case per week. The audience knows what the case is, and also knows by the end of Act 1 who is guilty. Because the audience knows the truth before Steve McGarrett does, there is no mystery. There is only Steve McGarrett. The drama of Hawaii 5-0 is watching the hero in action, watching Steve McGarrett stalk and strut, homing in on the truth. Homing in is the essence of what the classic hero of modern action does. Steve McGarrett is not weighed down by the administrative state police chief chores or by females or friends or emotions or any sorts of conflicting demands on his attention. His field of action is bare of diverting clutter. Thus, Chief Steve McGarrett single-mindedly acts to refashion the truth the audience already knows into an object of law, justice, modern heroism. In contrast, Captain Frank Furillo is what used to be designated a postmodern hero, viz. A hero whose virtues are suited to a more complex and corporate American era, i.e. a hero of reaction. Captain Frank Furillo does not investigate cases or single-mindedly home in. He commands a precinct. He is a bureaucrat, and his heroism is bureaucratic, with a genius for navigating cluttered fields. In each broadcast episode of Hill Street Blues, Captain Frank Furillo is beset by petty distractions on all sides from the very beginnings of Act 1. Not only, but 11 complex cases, each with suspects and snitches and investigating officers and angry community leaders and victims' families, all clamoring for redress. Hundreds of tasks to delegate, egos to massage, promises to make, promises from last week to keep. 2 or 3 cops' domestic troubles, payroll vouchers, duty logs, corruption to be tempted by and agonized over. A police chief who's a political parody, a hyperactive son, an ex-wife who haunts the frosted glass cubicle that serves as Frank Furillo's office, whereas Steve McGarrett's BS 1970s office was more closely resembled the libraries of landed gentry, hushed behind 2 heavy doors and wainscoted in thick tropical oak. Plus a coldly attractive public defendress who wants to talk about, did this suspect get Mirandized in Spanish, and can Frank stop coming too soon? He came too soon again last night. Maybe he should get into some kind of stress counseling. Plus all the weekly moral dilemmas and double binds his even-handed bureaucratic heroism gets Captain Frank Furillo into. Captain Frank Furillo of Hill Street Blues is a postmodern hero, a virtuoso of triage and compromise and administration. Frank Furillo retains his sanity, composure, and superior grooming in the face of a barrage of distracting, unheroic demands that would have left Steve McGarrett slumped, unkempt, and chewing his knuckle in administrative confusion. In further contrast to Steve McGarrett, Captain Frank Furillo is rarely filmed tight or full front. He is usually one part of a frenetic moving pan by the program's camera. In contrast, Hawaii Five-O's camera crew never even used a dolly, favoring a steady tripodic close-up on McGarrett's face that today seems more reminiscent of romantic portraiture than film drama. What kind of hero comes after McGarrett's Irishized modern cowboy, the lone man of action, riding a lonely herd in paradise? Furillo's is a whole different kind of loneliness. The postmodern hero was a heroic part of the herd, responsible for all of what he is part of, responsible to everyone, his lonely face as placid under pressure as a cow's face. The jud-jawed hero of action, a Y50, becomes the mild-eyed hero of reaction, Hill Street Blues, a decade later. And as we have observed thus far in our class, we, as a North American audience, have favored the more stoic corporate hero of reactive probity ever since. Some might be led to argue trapped in a reactive moral ambiguity of post and post-postmodern culture. But what comes next? What North American hero can hope to succeed the placid Frank? We await, I predict, the hero of non-action. Catatonic hero, the one beyond calm, divorced from all stimulus, carried here and there across sets by burly extras whose blood sings with retrograde amenities. Enormous Electrolysis rash journalist Helen Steepley's only putative published article before beginning her soft profile on Phoenix Cardinals punter Orrin J. Incandenza, and her only putative published article to have anything overtly to do with good old metropolitan Boston, 10 August, in the year of the Depend Adult Undergarment, 4 years after optical theorist, entrepreneur, tennis academician, and avant-garde filmmaker James O. Incandenza took his own life by putting his head in a microwave oven. Moment magazine has learned that the tragic fate of the second North American citizen to receive a Jarvik 9 exterior artificial heart has sadly been kept from the North American people. The woman, a 46-year-old Boston accountant with irreversible restenosis of the heart, responded so well to the replacement of her defective heart with a Jarvik 9 exterior artificial heart that within weeks she was able to resume the active lifestyle she had so enjoyed before stricken pursuing her active schedule with the extraordinary prosthesis portably installed in a stylish Etienne Aigner purse. The heart's ventricular tubes ran up to shunts in the woman's arms and ferried life-giving blood back and forth between her living active body and the extraordinary heart in her purse. Her tragic, untimely, and some might say cruelly ironic fate, however, has been the subject of the all-too-frequent silence. Needless tragedies are buried beneath when they cast a callous misunderstanding of public officials in a negative light of public knowledge. It took the sort of searching and fearless journalistic doggedness readers have come to respect in Moment to unearth the tragically negative facts of her fate. The 46-year-old recipient of the Jarvik 9 exterior artificial heart was actively window shopping in Cambridge, Massachusetts' fashionable Harvard Square when a transvestite purse snatcher, a drug addict with a criminal record all too well known to public officials, bizarrely outfitted in a strapless cocktail dress, spike heels, tattered feather boa, and auburn wig, brutally tore the life-sustaining purse from the woman's unwitting grasp. The active, alert woman gave chase to the purse-snatching woman for as long as she could, plaintively shouting to passers-by the words, "Stop her! She stole my heart!" On the fashionable sidewalk, crowded with shoppers reportedly shouting repeatedly, "She stole my heart! Stop her!" in response to her plaintive calls. Tragically, misunderstanding shoppers and passers-by merely shook their heads at one another, smiling knowingly at what they ignorantly presumed to be yet another alternative lifestyles relationship gone sour. A duo of Cambridge, Massachusetts patrolmen, whose names are being withheld from Moment's dogged queries, were publicly heard to passively quip, happens all the time, as the victimized woman staggered frantically past in the wake of the fleet transvestite, shouting for help for her stolen heart. That the prosthetic crime victim gave spirited chase for over 4 blocks before collapsing onto her empty chest is testimony to the impressive capacity of the Jarvik 9 replacement procedure, was the anonymous comment of a public medical official reached for comment by Moment magazine. The drug-crazed purse snatcher, informed officials passively speculated, may have found even his hardened conscience moved by the life-saving prosthesis the ill-gotten woman's Aigner purse revealed, which runs on the same rechargeable power cell as an electric man's razor, and may well have continued to beat and bleed for a period of time in the rudely disconnected purse. The purse snatcher's response to his conscience appears to have been cruelly striking the Jarvik 9 exterior artificial heart repeatedly with a stone, or small hammer-like tool, where its remains were found some hours later behind the historic Boston Public Library in fashionable Copley Square. Is medical science's awe-inspiring march forward, however, always doomed to include such tragic incidents of ignorance and callous loss, one might ask? Such seems to be the stance of North American officials. If indeed so, the victim's fate is frequently kept from the light of public knowledge. And the facts of the case's outcome? The 46-year-old deceased woman's formerly active, alert brain was removed and dissected 6 weeks later by a Brigham and Women's City of Boston Hospital medical student, reportedly so moved by her terse toe tag's account of the victim's heartless fate that he confessed to Moment a temporary inability to physically wield the power saw of his assigned task. Alphabetical tally of separatisteurs, anti-ONAN groups whose opposition to interdependence reconfiguration is designated by RCMP and USOUS as terrorist, extortionist, in character. Q equals Quebecois, E environmental, S separatist, V violent, VV extremely violent. Le assassin de fauteuil roulant, Q S VV. Le bloc québécois, Q S E. Calgarian pro-Canadian phalanx, EV. Le fil de Montcalm, QE. Le fil de Papineau, QSV. Le Front de la Libération de la Québec, QSVV. Le Parti québécois, QSE. Why, though in the early days of Interlace's internet teleputers that operated off largely the same fiber digital grid as the phone companies, the advent of video telephoning, aka videophony, enjoyed an interval of huge consumer popularity. Callers thrilled at the idea of phone interfacing both orally and facially. The little first-generation phone video cameras being too crude and narrow-apertured for anything much more than facial close-ups. On first-generation teleputers that at that time were a little more than high-tech TV sets, though of course they had that little intelligent agent homuncular icon that would appear at the lower right of a broadcast cable program and tell you the time and temperature outside, or remind you to take your blood pressure medication, or alert you to a particularly compelling entertainment option now coming up on channel like 491 or something, or of course now alerting you to an incoming video phone call, and then tap dancing with a little iconic straw boater and cane just under a menu of possible options for a response. And callers did love their little homuncular icons. But why, within like 16 months or 5 sales quarters, the tumescent demand curve for videophony suddenly collapsed like a kicked tent, so that by the year of the dependent adult undergarment, fewer than 10% of all private telephone communications utilized any video image fiber data transfers or coincident products and services, the average U.S. phone user deciding that she actually preferred the retrograde, old, low-tech Bell-era, voice-only telephonic interface after all. A preferential about-face that cost a good many precipitant video telephony-related entrepreneurs their shirts, plus destabilizing 2 highly respected mutual funds that had ground-floored heavily in video phone technology, and very nearly wiping out the Maryland State Employees Retirement System's Freddie Mac Fund, a fund whose administrator's mistress's brother had been an almost maniacally precipitant video phone technology entrepreneur. But so why the abrupt consumer retreat back to good old voice-only telephoning? The answer, in a kind of trivalent nutshell, is 1. Emotional stress, 2. Physical vanity, 3. A certain queer kind of self-obliterating logic in the microeconomics of consumer high-tech. 1. It turned out that there was something terribly stressful about visual telephone interfaces that hadn't been stressful at all about voice-only interfaces. Video phone consumers seemed suddenly to realize that they'd been subject to an insidious but wholly marvelous delusion about conventional voice-only telephony. They'd never noticed it before, the delusion. It's like it was so emotionally complex that it could be countenanced only in the context of its loss. Good old traditional audio-only phone conversations allowed you to presume that the person on the other end was paying complete attention to you, while also permitting you not to have to pay anything even close to complete attention to her. A traditional oral-only conversation utilizing a handheld phone whose earpiece contained only 6 little pinholes, but whose mouthpiece, rather significantly later seen, contained 6 to the power of 2 or 36 little pinholes, let you enter a kind of highway, hypnotic, semi-attentive fugue. While conversing, you could look around the room, doodle, fine-groom, peel tiny bits of dead skin away from your cuticles, compose phone pad haiku, stir things on the stove. You could even carry on a whole separate additional sign language and exaggerated facial expression type of conversation with people right there in the room with you, all while seeming to be right there, attending closely to the voice on the phone. And yet, and this was the retrospectively marvelous part, even as you were dividing your attention between the phone call and all sorts of other idle, fugue-like activities, you were somehow never haunted by the suspicion that the person on the other end's attention might be similarly divided. During a traditional call, e.g., as you, let's say, performed a close tactile blemish scan of your chin, you were in no way oppressed by the thought that your phone mate was perhaps also devoting a good percentage of her attention to a close tactile blemish scan. It was an illusion, and the illusion was oral and orally supported. The phone line's other end's voice was dense, tightly compressed, and vectored right into your ear, enabling you to imagine that the voice's owner's attention was similarly compressed and focused, even though your own attention was not. That was the thing. This bilateral illusion of unilateral attention was almost infantilely gratifying from an emotional standpoint. You got to believe you were receiving somebody's complete attention without having to return it. Regarded with the objectivity of hindsight, the illusion appears irrational, almost literally fantastic. It would be like being able to both lie and to trust other people at the same time. Video telephony rendered the fantasy insupportable. Callers now found they had to compose the same sort of earnest, slightly over-intense listener's expression they had to compose for in-person exchanges. Those callers who, out of unconscious habit, succumbed to fugue-like doodling or pants crease adjustment now came off looking rude, absent-minded, or childishly self-absorbed. Callers who even more unconsciously blemish-scanned or nostril-explored looked up to find horrified expressions on the video faces at the other end, all of which resulted in videophonic stress. Even worse, of course, was the traumatic expulsion from Eden feeling of looking up from tracing your thumb's outline on the reminder pad or adjusting the old unit's angle of repose in your shorts, and actually seeing your videophonic interfacee idly strip a shoelace of its gumlet as she talked to you, and suddenly realizing your whole infantile fantasy of commanding your partner's attention while you yourself got to fugue doodle and make little genital adjustments was diluted and insupportable, and that you were actually commanding not one bit more attention than you were paying here. The whole attention business was monstrously stressful, video callers found. 2. And the videophonic stress was even worse if you were at all vain, if you're worried at all about how you look, as in to other people. Which, all kidding aside, who doesn't? Good old oral telephone calls could be fielded without makeup, toupee, surgical prosthesis, etc., even without clothes, if that sort of thing rattled your saber. But for the image conscious, there was, of course, no such answer as you are informality about visual video telephone calls, which consumers began to see were less like having the good old phone ring than having the doorbell ring and having to throw on clothes and attach prostheses and do hair checks in the foyer mirror before answering the door. But the real coffin nail for videophony involved the way callers' faces looked on their TP screen during calls. Not their callers' faces, but their own, when they saw them on video. It was a 3-button affair, after all, to use the TP's cartridge card's video record option to record both pulses in a 2-way visual call and play the call back and see how your face had actually looked to the other person during the call. This sort of appearance check was no more resistible than a mirror, but the experience proved almost universally horrifying. People were horrified at how their own faces appeared on a TP screen. It wasn't just Anchorman's bloat, that well-known impression of extra weight that video inflicts on the face. It was worse. Even with high-end TP's high-def viewer screens, consumers perceived something essentially blurred and moist-looking about their phone faces, a shiny, pallid indefiniteness that struck them as not just unflattering, but somehow evasive, furtive, untrustworthy, unlikable. In an early and Omnius Interlace GTE focus group survey that was all but ignored in a storm of entrepreneurial sci-fi tech enthusiasm, almost 60% of respondents who received visual access to their own faces during videophonic calls specifically used the terms untrustworthy, unlikable, or hard to like in describing their own visage's appearance. Phenomenally, Omnius, 71% of senior citizen respondents specifically comparing their video faces to that of Richard Nixon during the Nixon-Kennedy debates of BS 1960. The proposed solution to what the telecommunications industry psychological consultants term video physiognomic dysphoria, or VPD, was, of course, the advent of high-definition masking. And in fact, it was those entrepreneurs who gravitated toward the production of high-definition videophonic imaging and then outright masks who got in and out of the short-lived videophonic era with their shirts plus solid additional nets. Mask-wise, the initial option of high-definition photographic imaging, i.e. taking the most flattering elements of a variety of flattering multi-angle photos of a given phone consumer, thanks to existing image configuration equipment already pioneered by the cosmetics and law enforcement industries, combining them into a wildly attractive high-depth broadcastable and composite of a face wearing an earnest, slightly over-intense expression of complete attention, was quickly supplanted by the more inexpensive and bite-economical option of using the exact same cosmetic and FBI software, actually casting the enhanced facial image in a form-fitting polybutylene resin mask, and consumers soon found that the high upfront cost of a permanent wearable mask was more than worth it, considering the stress and VPD reduction benefits, and the convenient Velcro straps for the back of the mask and caller's head cost peanuts. And for a couple of fiscal quarters, phone cable companies were able to rally VPD-afflicted consumers' confidence by working out a horizontally integrated deal where free composite and masking services came with a videophone hookup. The high-def masks, when not in use, simply hung on a small hook on the side of a T-piece phone console, admittedly looking maybe a little bit surreal and discomfiting when detached and hanging there empty and wrinkled, and sometimes they were potentially awkward mistaken identity snafus involving multi-user family or company phones and the hurried selection and attachment of the wrong mask taken from some long row of empty hanging masks. But all in all, the mask seemed initially like a viable industry response to the vanity, stress, and Nixonian facial image problem. 2, and maybe also 3. But combine the natural entrepreneurial instinct to satisfy all sufficiently high consumer demand on the one hand with what appears to be an almost equally natural distortion in the way persons tend to see themselves, and it becomes possible to account historically for the speed with which the whole high-def videophonic mask thing spiraled totally out of control. Not only is it weirdly hard to evaluate what you yourself look like whether you're good-looking or not, e.g. try looking in the mirror and determining where you stand in the attractiveness hierarchy with anything like the objective ease you can determine whether just about anyone else you know is good looking or not. But it turned out that consumers' instinctively skewed self-perception plus vanity-related stress meant that they begin preferring and then outright demanding videophone masks that were really quite a lot better looking than they themselves were in person. High-def mask entrepreneurs ready and willing to supply not just verisimilitude but aesthetic enhancement, stronger chins, smaller eye bags, airbrushed scars, and wrinkles soon pushed the original mimetic mask entrepreneurs right out of the market. In a gradually unsubtilizing progression within a couple more sales quarters, most consumers were now using masks so undeniably better looking on video phones than their real faces were in person, transmitting to one another such horrendously skewed and enhanced mask images of themselves that enormous psychosocial stress began to result. Large numbers of phone users suddenly reluctant to leave home and interface personally with people who they feared were now habituated to seeing their far better looking mask selves on the phone and would on seeing them in person suffer, so went the caller's phobia, the same illusion-shattering aesthetic disappointment that, Certain women who always wear makeup give people the first time they ever see them without makeup. The social anxieties surrounding the phenomenon, psych consultants termed optimistically misrepresentational masking, or OMM, intensified steadily as the tiny, crude first-generation videophone cameras technology improved to where the aperture wasn't as narrow, and now the higher-end tiny cameras could countenance and transmit more or less full-body images. Certain psychologically unscrupulous entrepreneurs began marketing full-body polybutylene and urethane 2D cutouts, sort of like the headless muscle man and bathing beauty cutouts you could stand behind and position your chin on the cardboard neck stump for cheap photos at the beach. Only these full-body videophone masks were vastly more high-tech and convincing looking. Once you added variable 2D wardrobe, hair and eye color options, various aesthetic enlargements and reductions, etc., costs started to press the envelope of mass-market affordability, even though there was at the same time horrific social pressure to be able to afford the very best possible mass 2D body image to keep from feeling comparatively hideous looking on the phone. How long, then, could one expect it to have been before the relentless entrepreneurial drive toward an even better mousetrap conceived of the transmittable tableau, aka TT, which in retrospect was probably the really sharp business end of the videophonic coffin nail. With TTs, facial and bodily masking could now be dispensed with altogether and replaced with the video-transmitted image of what was essentially a heavily doctored still photograph, one of an incredibly fit and attractive and well-turned-out human being, someone who actually resembled you, the caller, only in such limited respects as like race and limb number. The photo's face focused attentively in the direction of the videophonic camera from amid the sumptuous but not ostentatious appointments of the sort of room that best reflected the image of yourself you wanted to transmit, etc. The tableaux were simply high-quality transmission-ready photographs scaled down to diorama-like proportions and fitted with a plastic holder over the videophone camera, not unlike a lens cap. Extremely good-looking but not terrifically successful entertainment celebrities, the same sort who in decades past would have swelled the cast lists of infomercials, found themselves in demand as models for various high-end videophone tableaux. Because they involved simple transmission-ready photography instead of 149 computer imaging and enhancement, the tableau could be mass-produced and commensurately priced, and for a brief time they helped ease the tension between the high cost of enhanced body masking and the monstrous aesthetic pressures videophony exerted on callers, not to mention also providing employment for set designers, photographers, airbrushers, and infomercial-level celebrities, hard-pressed by the declining fortunes of broadcast television advertising. 3. But there's some sort of revealing lesson here in the beyond short-term viability curve of advances in consumer technology. The career of videophony conforms neatly to the curve's classically annular shape. First, there's some sort of terrific sci-fi-like advance in consumer tech, like from oral to videophoning, which advance always, however, has certain unforeseen disadvantages for the consumer. And then, but the market niches created by those disadvantages, like people stressfully vain or repulsion at their own videophonic appearance, are ingeniously filled by a sheer entrepreneurial verve. And yet the very advantages of these ingenious disadvantage compensations seem all too often to undercut the original high-tech advance, resulting in consumer recidivism and curve closure and massive shirt loss for precipitant investors. In the present case, the stress and vanity compensation's own evolution saw video callers rejecting first their own faces and then even their own heavily masked and enhanced physical likeness, and finally covering the video cameras altogether and transmitting attractively stylized static tableau to one another TPs. And behind these lens-cap dioramas and transmitted tableau, callers of course found that they were once again stresslessly invisible, unvainly make-up and toupee-less and baggy-eyed behind their celebrity dioramas, once again free, since once again unseen to doodle, blemish scan, manicure, crease check, while on their screen the attractive, intensely attentive face of the well-appointed celebrity on the other end's tableau reassured them that they were the objects of a concentrated attention they themselves didn't have to exert. And of course, but these advantages were nothing other than the once lost and now appreciated advantages of good old Bell-era blind oral-only telephony with its 6 and 6 to the power of 2 pinholes. The only difference was that now these expensive, silly, unreal stylized tableaux were being transmitted between TPs on high-priced video fiber lines. How much time after this realization sank in and spread among consumers, mostly via phone, interestingly, would any microeconometrist expect to need to pass before high-tech visual videophony was almost abandoned? Then, a return to good old telephoning, not only dictated by common consumer sense, but actually after a while culturally approved as a kind of chic integrity, not ludditism, but a kind of retrograde transcendence of sci-fi-ish high-tech for its own sake, a transcendence of the vanity and the slavery to high-tech fashion that people view as so unattractive in one another. In other words, a return to oral-only telephony became, at the closed curve's end, a kind of status symbol of anti-vanity, such that only callers utterly lacking in self-awareness continued to use videophony and tableau, to say nothing of masks, and these tacky facsimile-using people became ironic cultural symbols of tacky, vain slavery to corporate PR and high-tech novelty, became the subsidized era's tacky equivalents of people with leisure suits, black velvet paintings, sweater vests for their poodles, electric zirconium jewelry, no-code lingua scrapers, and see. Most communications consumers put their tableau dioramas at the back of a knick-knack shelf and covered their cameras with standard black lens caps, and now use their phone consoles' little mask hooks to hang these new little plasticine address and phone diaries, especially made with a little receptacle at the top of the binding for convenient hanging from former mask hooks. Even then, of course, the bulk of U.S. consumers remained verifiably reluctant to leave home and teleputer and to interface personally, though this phenomenon's endurance can't be attributed to the videophony fad per se. And anyway, the new panagoraphobia served to open huge new entrepreneurial, teleputerized markets for home shopping and delivery, and didn't cause much industry concern.